I don't know how many of you are left that sort of follow League of Legends esports anymore. Obviously, that was previously my bread and butter. You know, I broke a lot of big stories in that down the years. A lot of people seem to labor under the delusion. My big investigative journalism career started in the start of 2015 when iBuyPower were banned by Valve, and everybody reached out to me to say, well done, Richard. And of course, now they spit on me and curse my name. I basically have broken, probably since 2012, maybe even a little bit before, a scene-changing, esports landscape-changing story almost every year. So it didn't just start in 2015. And listen, just because I've gone away from League, I occasionally will come back and drop a banger, as the kids call them. And I think this was one of them. So TSM, they're in a weird position right now because they've had so much negative publicity, just so much piled upon each other, you know, loads of conflict of interest claims, loads of players saying they've been treated poorly by the org, particularly Reggie, the founder, being investigated by both TSM and Riot Games for bullying and harassment, according to a report in Wired. And what this has obviously done is it's shaped a kind of a world where the luster of TSM doesn't shine quite as bright as it did. Now, you couple that with the fact of their massive underperformance in the league, where they're really struggling to win games and really struggling to look coherent. It's been a bad time. It's been a dark time. Now, obviously, I don't have any sympathy for TSM fans by and large, because they are some of the most obnoxious fans on the internet, but they're also generally young. And I think, you know, it's been hard for a lot of them. I'll be honest, right? When you're a kid, you put your faith in people and institutions that you really shouldn't. And that can be celebrities, that can be sports teams, sports players, I don't know, politicians, right? And political parties. And eventually, over time, what breaks you down and turns you into a jaded 39-year-old man is obviously the fact that those individuals and institutions consistently let you down and consistently fail. And I think a lot of those kids, a lot of those TSM fans are going to be really disappointed with the reality of kind of what's been going on in TSM. And I'm sure this story sort of upset them a little bit, although, as we'll talk about, it does kind of give them a little out. So, players have been underperforming. They fired their coach. And what was weird about the firing of their coach, and I think we've got the statement here, is the way that it was framed was that it wasn't for performance, which, you know, by the way, it could have been. They didn't even necessarily need to elaborate, but it came out of left field, and obviously a lot of people were still reeling from the as of undisclosed reasons for LS's sudden departure from Cloud9. Still, that isn't public what all that's about, but they categorically said in their statement, we were recently made aware of very serious allegations of conflict of interest and unethical practices against League of Legends coach Peter Zhang. After an initial investigation, we have terminated him effective immediately, and we are working with external legal counsel to complete a full investigation. Now, that's very serious. It's also ironic because it now suggests TSM knows what a conflict of interest is. Well done. We're leveling up our game. To clarify, president of the company that negotiates contracts of the players, fucking one of said players, and then inadvertently leaking information about the status of another player, thus hampering their career. Not conflict of interest in the eyes of them and the eyes of many, and only in the eyes of me, it seems, in the world of esports, including many Rocket League plebs who think they can come to the party and talk. But now this, what we're about to get into, conflict of interest, of course. And actually, as of today, there was some Zoomers tweeting at me going, you've put that leader in Doublelift as a conflict of interest in your article. It was not. They were working towards the same goal. They were, in fact, not working towards the same goal because one is beholden to the company, right? One has to be beholden to the company, rather. The other only beholden to themselves. But now suddenly, this entity here is beholden to the partner and the company, thus creating dual interests that conflict. It's almost as if you weren't a fucking moron. You could just grasp that, but it's okay. I've seen the state of the American education system, brothers and sisters. I sympathize with you deeply that you are basically operating on sort of like a 10-year deficit compared to people of my generation. It's fine. in we go. What had he done? What were these horrific conflict of interests? Well, so I started poking around the edges of the story because, interestingly enough, I still have a lot of contacts in the League of Legends world. It's still something I would cover if we weren't in this ridiculous, deranged situation with the League of Legends subreddit, which Riot Games have even acquiesced to becoming the main hub of discussion for their games. Something they very, it's not even tacit. It's, they agreed to it by closing down their own forums, right? They said, no, the Reddit forums are our forums, and we've got such a good relationship with the mods. We're perfectly fine and happy with that being the arrangement. They deleted their own forums, and by the way, with it, loads of examples of fuckery and wrongdoing. So, bit of a fucking blessing in disguise, wasn't it? So I thought, fuck it. It's a big story. People are curious. It's TSM. I won't lie. That was a factor in wanting to get this, out there. And so I said, all right, let's do it then. Let's start the process. Goblin mode. Pour a scotch. Here's a call. Here's a call. Here's a call. You get a call. You get a call. Ghostbusters 2016. Garbage, wasn't it? And so eventually what I was able to determine that what TSM are saying has happened. They believe that in Peter Zhang's capacity as a coach, he's used a combination of cultural influence and status within the org, essentially for the purposes of personal enrichment. And what do we mean by that? Well, there's at least one player, he seems to be taking a cut of their salary, approximately 20% based on my understanding. So $1,000 a month, that's the 20%-ish, going into his bank account from an academy player that he essentially scouted and signed. And so why is that bad? Well, on the surface of it, and I'm not one to make allegations, after all, I am merely a journalist, and I have certainly given Peter Zhang the right to reply, as we'll get into here. I went out and looked at it, but why is it bad? Because that, to me, just as a layman in the world of sports contracts and everything else, that looks like what we call a pay-to-play scheme, essentially. And what do I mean by that? You might have heard that term in politics. It's like the specific allegation is that it appears, right, on that evidence, that what Peter Zhang would do is he would say to a player, listen, I'm the coach at TSM, I can get you on TSM. The other people at TSM like the idea of you playing for TSM. I'll secure the deal if you give me a percentage of your money. And obviously it's very desirable to be part of TSM. If you're coming from the Chinese region, you're going to make a lot more money, have a lot more status, get a chance to live in America. And so we know, based on Peter Zhang's own admissions, there's at least one academy player that is paying him a percentage. Now, we'll get into what he says is happening there in just a moment. But obviously this opens up a lot of questions because when I was interviewing Peter and, again, talking to my source network, it was kind of interesting because the way he was positioning it was so, I mean, check this out. He was basically being told by TSM, go get us some Chinese players. We like these Chinese and Taiwanese players, these ones, but, you have input in the scouting. And then he went to the Chinese region and was handling all of the business. And then also, they didn't have a translator, so he was translating for the players. So you had this situation where the guy who represents TSM was translating the contract and explaining things to the players who were about to enter into an agreement with TSM. So that's a fucking mess anyway. I mean, that's, again, obvious conflict of interest there. And so now we don't know. There's speculation in the community. Was he even selecting these players, doing the best for TSM? Was it a meritocracy, or was it rather players he had an existing relationship with that he may be able to pump for cash somewhere down the line? Now, the next thing that comes up is they also discovered he was asking people for loans. Now, apparently, he reached out to over a dozen people to loan amounts of money from 10 to, I think, 200,000 in the end was what some sources had said. But basically large amounts of cash with the proviso that he was going to pay it back at the end of the month. And why was he doing that? Well, he was doing that because apparently he's got a sick grandmother back home in China, and she's got a very expensive bill due at the end of the month for unbelievably, expensive surgery, and he needs to settle it because if they can't pay, well, I don't even know what happens retroactively. But then again, it is China, so it could be bad, I won't rule that out. And so, right, he was getting the money together for that, but the problem was, this was the same time that sword art, now, if you know anything about the sword art move to TSM, it is one of the most scrutinized moves in League of Legends history, probably after Huni. And why? Because we all know the bag was acquired and then the player just wasn't very good. That's the long and the short of it. And wasn't there for a particularly long amount of time on that basis. Apparently, he was involved, Peter Zhang was involved in the sword art move because they had a good relationship. He acted as a conduit for that. And anyway, when Sword Art signed for TSM, and trust me, got the absolute one of the most crazy bags I've seen in esports. I'm not talking like Shroud Ninja going a mixer shit, but it's mental. And anyway, he decided while he was in America, I want to buy a car, not just any car, an $80,000 car, right? Because it's esports. Who saves money? Right, and listen, I'm just a normal guy. Like for me, bottle of scotch and a 6-pack in the fridge, and fucking ramen in the cupboard, and like I'm happy, man. Like I don't need to have any of that shit. I don't like nice clothes. I don't collect watches. I just don't give a fuck. Things just don't interest me, I guess, in that sense. I can't conceive of what an $80,000 car even is. Like, I don't know. What's that? What is that? What is an $80,000 car? It seems pretty mad to me. I mean, but I'm sure people in the chat are going to go, 80,000 isn't even fucking that much, Richard, for the car. Well, you boomers, you had it all, whatever, right? But it seems like a lot for a car for me. Especially one that you're just going to use almost on a temporary basis in America. But anyway, he used his friend Peter Zhang as a conduit to buy the car. And then when he went back to Weibo, right? It is Weibo, fuck. Anyway, he went back to Weibo, right? And when he did, he said to Peter Zhang, will you sell my $80,000 car barely used for me? And Peter Zhang said, of course. And then he sold it. And then he said, I'll just keep that money, I guess, for now, to pay towards these medical debts. And so at the same time, he needs to pay this bill for his sick grandmother. Sword Art also apparently says to him, I'm going to go public at the end of the month or in a few days, whatever, if you don't give me the money back. And so in a panic, he starts reaching out to academy players, influencers, former players, current TSM players, loads of people saying, I need the money now. But the problem is, different stories were given to different parties. It's a bit of a convoluted mess. Now, I've tried to make sense of it. And I took a statement from Peter. We had a long talk because, I still know people from back in the day. And, I think I first talked to Zhang back when, after LMQ. I think it was. So that's the, not saying we're fucking besties or anything, far from it, but, I'll drop people the occasional message and, follow them on Twitter and, if they ever need anything, they can hit me up, that sort of thing. So I was able to, get in touch and we broke it all down. And look, I don't know. My gut read is that maybe he's scrambling to try and create a cohesive narrative that in some way justifies what he does. But he's already admitted to things that are disqualifying. And I can't disagree with the firing, absolutely, based on his own words that he told me. I'll read you the statement he said. I recognize that keeping the money from the sold car was wrong. Yeah, that is theft. So yes, it's a type of theft, isn't it? But I was working towards paying that debt and had paid off half before I was fired. My grandmother's bill was due at the end of this month, and so I wasn't able to pay both debts. I was having a very hard financial time, but I will pay back every penny to Sword Art. By the sounds of it, though, Sword Art, I don't think he really needs to scratch, but yeah, you should pay your debts. The other claims against my person are not true. It is common in China for friends and colleagues to loan each other money. I have learned a hard lesson about the cultural differences in America. I will work with Riot in any investigation and have evidence necessary to prove my innocence. And as I said, he admitted to taking that 20% from an academy player called Yersan's money. Now, he said to me he was taking the money, right? But that he was paying an agent back in China on behalf of the academy player. And he's got text messages and everything else that'll exonerate him and prove that to be true. Now, it all sounds unlikely, but, you know, it can get convoluted and weird in esports. I've definitely seen crazy shit and crazy financial paper trails in the past. But, I don't know. My read on it, I asked Peter this at the time, was that he got himself massively into debt somehow, maybe doing other things, and you know, not medical bills. Let's put it that way. Let's put it delicately. And he said, no, it's all absolutely true. I can absolutely prove it all. He told me he can prove that he requested time off for a family emergency. You know, apparently it's all there. So I guess you'll have to wait and see what they say in the Riot Games investigation. But should there be one. Riot Games, by the way, they might say this is an internal matter. Now, I reached out to TSM. What a mad world we live in, by the way, guys. Because obviously I'm a boomer. You know, I keep bringing that up. 39-year-old man boomer. Dead inside. Nothing left to do or achieve. And basically, I've been around media a long, long time. I recognize, like, names from when I was coming up. Big publications and stuff. And I saw a name I recognized when I was reaching out for comment with TSM. And the long and the short of it was, the person that was doing the PR for TSM now is the founder of TMZ. What a mad world. Like, TMZ, the founder of TMZ came and is working in esports now. That's just incredible. That's just, like, amazing. I was like, wow. It is like, because, I remember these things. Media, especially American media, I hope we all know by now, that's my fucking jam. I love that stuff. Love talking about it, love analysing it. So anyway, I had to reach out to TSM to get comments in there. It's in the thing. They just said nothing further to add, And they're doing their investigation. So TSM are going to do an investigation and push something out. And we also had this. I'll just give you the... So you remember it's funny how the world works, We just did that Four Horsemen, didn't we? About where we were talking about how the NA LCS Players Association was changing ownership, changing new people having in it, being in it, and what would they be doing? What would their first major battleground would be? Well, it's this, because obviously these players play in North America, and you can see the LCSPA was made aware in recent days of the circumstances that led to Peter Zhang's removal from TSM. An investigation is underway to ensure all players are adequately protected and supported. And so what do they mean by protected and supported? Well, obviously, if the allegations are the pay-to-play scheme, if there's evidence of that, that's really bad and might even uncover something bigger. I think it's going to be unbelievably hard to conclusively prove that, and that might get softened down the road, but who knows. Then you've got, of course, as a coach, you shouldn't be applying any type of, because power dynamics, kids. So again, before the TSM are going, but it is an anime, and that is how I view the world, only through the lens of anime. If someone in a position of seniority and authority comes to you and says, I need a loan, and remember who got you your job, you might feel a little bit pressured to give them the loan, especially if you've got the loose cash hanging around. So, power dynamics. You can't obviously be asking a loan fucking money from people you have direct dominion over. It's just not fucking appropriate. So, that in itself, and the fact that it wasn't just one person, it was multiple people, that in itself is disqualifying. I know in Peter's statement, he said, well, it's just a cultural thing. Might well be the case, but obviously within a league operations framework, I don't think people would particularly like it happening in China. And I did see a number of Chinese League of Legends fans responding to that statement specifically by saying, this is just grade A bullshit. There's just no way. There's no way you would ever use, you would ever loan somebody that you didn't have a direct family tie to $70,000 or whatever. So I also saw a lot, and this is an interesting aspect where I think we'll probably we can only really speculate, but there is obviously very similar to other issues we've seen in esports. You know, there's this again the cultural differences that. You know, a Chinese academy player, a young Chinese player, is obviously going to respect somebody that's nearly 30 years old and is a coach and is a direct person that you would report to. So, you know, they do view it differently. And I imagine publicly the players are probably going to defend Peter, right? Because whether they being exploited or being subject to a conflict of interest and knowing that that's happened and being angry about it are two very separate things. And I imagine the players themselves probably don't feel that aggrieved with what happened. It certainly seems to be that way. We've already had a response, by the way. If I can just get this up, where was it? One of the players has already come out, and I think you'll see lots of them tweet like this. My advice, by the way, guys, just don't. Because Riot and TSM and everyone else is going to really fucking hate this. Just everyone go ghost for now is the smart play. But this is one of the players that, because he's from that region, happens to play on TSM Academy, Shenyi. Peter never took my yuan. That's what he's saying. Peter never took my money, essentially. Because, again, one of the defenses their coach was putting forward was a lot of these guys didn't have North American bank accounts. So what they would do is if they ever wanted a large amount of just dollars, I'd get them to transfer yuan to my Chinese bank account. And then I would go to an American ATM and I would withdraw the money and give them cash. Now, obviously, that could mean that some of those financial transactions are incredibly hard to prove because you've got money going in, cash going out. So you can see one aspect of it. And then even if you've got the receipt of like an ATM withdrawal or bank withdrawal, how do you prove, without a written receipt and signature, how do you prove the receipt of cash? It's very hard. You know, cash is obviously hard to trace and track down. So that's why, you know, if you're ever doing anything a bit nefarious, paying for it in cold hard cash is generally always preferable. So there's definitely legs to this story. And what was also just unreal, there I am thinking, right, well, now we play the waiting game, you know, crack our knuckles and just sit back and wait to see what comes next. Well, Doublelift, obviously formerly of TSM, somebody who, by the way, had publicly been critical of the firing of Peter Zhang up until now, because obviously he's very anti-TSM now due to his experiences, and obviously Lena, former president, his partner, left the company. But let me just get you this. We can just listen to some of these stories and that Doublelift tells and see how it aligns with my reporting and the different versions that different parties are putting out at the moment. Now, I will spare you the part where he tries to read the article. So this is going to give us a bit of context. Obviously, remember, Doublelift has known Peter Zhang a long time, just by being adjacent in the league. You know, League of Legends for a time a few years ago was very, you know, the word incestuous is like needlessly negative, but it was very close-knit is a positive framing of it. People used to talk all of the time. People used to, you know, share information. Everybody knew, like, whenever there was, like, rumors or scandals or weird shit going on, because everybody talked and everybody hung out. And it was like that for a long time in NA. So what he's going to do is, but also he's had direct working experience with him. So he's going to tell us some stories here and give us some information. Let's just listen along.
Peter Zhang, you know, I've known him for like 8 years. Always been nice to me. Always been nice to me and Lena. You know, definitely considered him a friend, but not one that I would consider. You know how you have those friends where you just know that they're the kind of friend who does like the most stupid shit with their money, and so you should absolutely never lend this type of person money. Yeah, that was him. And he came to me a couple days ago and he asked me to borrow $70,000. He said his grandma had cancer. She's dying in the hospital and he needs to pay the hospital bill, which is $70,000. And he doesn't have the money yet, but he will have the money at the end of the month and then he'll pay me back.
Now, this totally aligns with what I was looking into, and the things I'd heard. But what's interesting is, of course, the amount, because that amount is effectively all of the debt, isn't it, to Sword Art? I believe the car was specifically sold for 75,000 because it had depreciated a little bit in value. But Peter Zhang had pledged to pay the full 80 anyway, or whatever it was worth on the Blue Book. And so it's very close to the amount you would imagine he would be able to pay if he had any extra money saved up. But the weird part is he asked other people for just other amounts of money. So there wasn't one consistent amount he asked for, and it ranged, as I said. And so that's where it starts to get even weirder.
The first question is, well, how do you have the money inbound, but you don't have it yet? And I had so many questions. I was like, what the fuck? Like, how are you getting all this money? And like, why are you going to me, man? And he's like, you're one of the only people I know who would have this much cash. Please, like, I need to borrow 70K. And honestly, guys, I'm not comfortable. Like, there is a saying where it's like, anytime you let somebody borrow money, just assume that it's gone. Assume it's a gift, because you are going to fucking explode trying to get it back. And I've always known this, and so I've always been hesitant to lend people large sums of money. If somebody asked me in an emergency for a few $1,000s, or somebody that I really, really trusted, and whose situation was like super transparent, I would lend them a pretty large amount of money. 70,000 to someone I barely know, fuck no, that's not happening. But I did feel bad, because it's like, oh my god, am I like indirectly killing his grandma because he can't afford this surgery? Like, the proof of this happening is very sketchy, but there's a chance that it's actually real. So
no, you're not.
I was talking to Lena about it, like, I'm not the most comfortable. That's not where it ends. I told him, let me think about it. I'll get back to you tomorrow. I had full plans to just tell him hell no the next day. But then I was like, okay, I can't be the only one that he asked for money. I'm gonna ask around. So I asked everyone that I knew, and everyone that I knew that he knew, if they also got approached. And without naming names, this guy literally asked everyone for money. And the story was different every single time. So he told me he needed 70K. He told somebody else he needed 200K.
Now, when I heard the fucking 200K number, I was like, it just didn't make any... It didn't make any logical sense within all the information I had laid out around me. We knew about the car. We knew about potential agent fees having to go back to China. We knew about, perhaps having to pay back some loans to some other people, maybe potentially based on which timeline you subscribe. There was no world where the totality of the debt had ever added up to 200,000. And so, based on the information I have, that looks like he's asking for way more fucking money than what would be necessary. And whether you believe the story or not, and spoiler, I don't think many people do believe the story based on the public reaction I've seen. The 200K claim really starts to chip away at this notion that this was about settling a medical debt and simultaneously settling this debt with Sword Art. 'Cause remember, he said he'd already paid back half of it. So he didn't need... You know what I mean? So, yeah.
He told somebody else that he only needed 10K. For me, he told me his grandma needed an operation. For someone else, he told them that his grandma needs stem cell therapy, which makes... I don't even think stem cells have anything to do with fucking cancer, but I could be wrong.
We won't get into medical science, I don't think. Let's not. That's not your expertise. You are very good at last hitting creeps, though. So.
And then for somebody else, he told him medicine. And I chalked that up like, okay, maybe, his English isn't that great. Maybe it's like some mix of stem cells, medicine, and an operation that he just is, it's like slightly different each time. That's not the money, the amount of money that he uses to operation is changing all the time. Then I thought about, like, logically, okay, like this guy, he talking about a cancer operation in China. That place has universal health care. How the fuck is a cancer operation costing anywhere between 70 and 200K? And then I thought, what are the odds that he can't get a loan from a bank And then there's no payment plan available for this thing. It's like you're in a fucking country with standardized healthcare, and they come up with you this fat ass bill. They're like, yeah, you have to pay a lump sum all at once. And I was like, okay, this is sounding like there's like more and more shit stacking against like this whole $70,000 fucking cancer op.
Just in regards to this claim as well, I actually saw this repeated a lot, saying that there was no way you could ever sort of acquire 70,000 or, a ballpark healthcare bills in China. So I did a little bit of research, and by a little bit of research, I mean I used Google, and read like a Wikipedia page, went to some Chinese websites, translated them, looked at costs and stuff. As far as I can tell, this isn't an accurate framing of how healthcare works in China. Obviously, private healthcare costs can be as expensive as anywhere else in the world. For a lot of the types of public healthcare costs, and they do spend a lot on public healthcare, you also have to pay up front and then reimburse. So you cover the costs and then you reclaim it from the state. So it is entirely plausible on that basis, at least, that yes, there is a bill that has to be paid to a particular deadline, even if it was something he would then later be able to claim back, which would of course feed into the earlier claim that he said, if you give me the money, I could pay the bill and then I can get it back. It's entirely, that to me is like a level of detective work that's not necessary to sort of maybe even condemn the actions of the individual, and it's speculative. So I'm just adding additional information as a counterpoint to that. I'm not saying I would have more knowledge about Chinese healthcare than Doublelift, certainly not, but based on the things I read on the internet, it seems that the story at least could be plausible.
Okay, and then the crazy shit happened. I found out Sword Art came here and bought a fucking like Lambo or some shit. I forgot what kind of car it was. It was like a legit like insane sports car. And Peter Zhang sold it and never gave him the money. He got a Mercedes. And I'm just like, at that point, I was like, okay, this guy, he owes Sword Art a shit ton of money. He's doing a bunch of sketchy under the table stuff. He owes this guy like a metric fuck ton of money. That was a super expensive car. I didn't really know at the time that it was 80K, but I knew that he definitely owed Sword Art money, and I was like, this is fucked. Like, he is just using these guys' loans to pay back his previous loan, and then he's just going to keep, like, Ponzi scheming people into giving him a loan so he can pay back his previous loan. I have no idea what he was doing with that money, I'm not going to lie. I've heard some really wild shit about Peter Zhang. Like, he donates a shit ton of money to girl streamers on Weibo. Like, he goes on Chinese streaming sites and finds, like, attractive girl streamers and donates them like a stupid amount of money.
Oh no. I'm very conflicted about this additional piece of information being in the public domain. I think at the moment it's absolutely imperative that there is, for something this big, I still believe in the principle of the assumption of innocence. And I think that's important. There's going to be likely 3 investigations are underway, and I think additional details like this polluting the waters are a little bit unfair. Like, sure, listen, I've heard rumors about lots of people. I've heard, one of the things I learned, there was a while ago, was I remember when we used to do First Blood. And that I know I'm really rolling it back. Although I did hear from Nintendo the other day. It's good to see him doing well. But I used to do a League of Legends podcast called First Blood. Used to be me, Nintendo, Broken Shards. Very old school content. It's still on my channel. You can still go find it. It was back in the trash talk era. We were one of the first people to do basically a podcast that really fucking broke apart League of Legends and Riot game narratives, and it had like super cool people on, like Dentist, if you remember him. I think Deficio came on it, LS. We get guests and we just fucking tear up, we tear up teams, we tear up players, we tear up, transfers, tear up Riot's nonsense. And obviously, it sort of was born out of me being told by Alpha Draft, you can't be on the League of Legends podcast because Riot don't like you. It just makes it too hard for us to have any positive relationships with Riot Games. So anyway, we used to do this First Blood podcast, and one of the things I would regularly do is I would put rumors out there. You know, it was like gossip, right? And I'd done my homework and asked lots of people, but there were a couple of ones that really had negative impacts on players' lives, and it wasn't a good feeling, actually. And I remember sort of like there was one in particular, which I won't reiterate, obviously, that would be self-defeating, but I remember saying it. I remember the player going like, dude, like, I don't even know if that's true or not. I fucking hope it isn't, but that's like, that just makes me really sad. And I was like, oh God, yeah, man. So for personal stuff like this, while it adds additional context to something, I almost think, you know, don't talk about that. Don't talk about having like, you know, well, I don't even know what you would call it, like a simping addiction or whatever. Like, you know, because it's, things are bad enough. Motherfucker's been fired. Motherfucker's going to get investigated. Maybe have his reputation damaged to a point he can't have a feasible career in esports again. You know, any additional details? You know, I know players who've got fucking alcohol problems. I know players who've had substance abuse problems. You know, I know players who've had addictions and stuff. That's all off the table for me. But that's just me personally. Now that said, back to this video, I guess.
I've heard like the craziest shit about Peter Zhang. The thing is, this guy is obviously terrible with money. Like legit awful. I would. This is like Sky Williams level of like never ever let this person borrow money because you're just giving him a donation. Ellis doesn't understand how he does not have money. I know the guy's been working as a coach in North America, presumably making anywhere between like 50 and 100 something K a year, and I just don't understand how he doesn't have money. I don't get it. I don't understand, man. How did you sell someone's $80,000 car and then spend the money? What did you think was going to happen when you spent the money, man? Did you think he was going to forget about the 80K that he's owed? Like, there's no fucking way that you would ever do that. Like, how dumb do you have to be, bro?
Like, and, you know, I'll kind of add to that. Like, Doublelift here is talking through the lens of a player, right? And saying, like, how can you not have money? Now, LS has probably been very smart with his money. He certainly held, I would say, more lucrative positions than, you know, in terms of just raw payout than Peter did. And also, you know, listen, everything's in the state of California, especially around LA. In League of Legends in North America, and that place, apart from being a fucking hellhole, is isn't that right, Casey Neistat? We finally agree on something. Not Seth Rogen though. But anyway, you know, apart from that place being a fucking hellhole, you know, it's an expensive place to live. It's one of the most expensive fucking places in the world. It's one of the most expensive places to fucking live in the world. It's mental, and you know. In terms of return for your dollar, maybe he's not saving a lot. If it's as low as $50,000, by the way, for his salary, then fucking hell, I can actually imagine how he could get into debt quite quickly. So, you know, again, I think these additional details, these additional pile-ons, you know, I just want to give everybody the benefit of the doubt and just do a thorough investigation, and we'll find out one way or the other, you know, to the extent of what was going on.
He just like went to the fucking blackjack table or like went to the casino and bet it all on black. Like, what's going on? He's like, easy 80K, boys. All on red. I do not want to say who he has 200K from, but what I will say is that he got multiple players on TSM to send him anywhere between 12 and 25K. And then that same day, those players, before that wire transfer went through, those players canceled it and like saved their money. Like, because it takes a long time for lump sums like that to be delivered to the recipient, they were able to cancel the transaction.
So a little bit of a detail about this detail. This wasn't in the report because it's almost kind of incidental. But what I didn't want to do was kind of like put this in the public domain and then kind of have it like a potential hindrance to investigations or tip anybody off to any information that they shouldn't know. But basically what happened was somewhere along the chain of loan requests, somebody told TSM management and said, do you know your coach is doing this and asking the following people for the following amounts of money, and some of the people have given it to him? I think you should fucking take a look at this. And Reginald made a comment Reginald made a comment. Let me just see. Yeah, here it is. Reginald made a comment here saying, because somebody said, how could this be going on for as long as it did? And Reginald said, we reacted within 24 hours. Now, true, they did because to the loan situation, right? They absolutely did. What seemed to have happened was somewhere, I think the timeline's approximately on the 16th. This is when the loans were being requested with a view to paying Sword Art back by the 18th and paying his grandmother's medical bills by the 30th. And on the late the 16th, 17th, somebody tipped off the management and they said, cancel all the wire transfers. The wire transfers were cancelled. The money didn't happen. And they pulled him in, said he was being fired. And yeah, so on that matter, they did. The problem is the Yusan money, and this is from Peter Zhang's mouth, his very own mouth, it has been going into his bank account since they signed the player. So that's not 24 hours, you see. That's far from it. He joined, I think, like a year ago or something. So that's been going on for a bit longer, and it's like, unless they can prove that there is another agent that's getting that $1,000 a month, that's probably something you should know about. That's probably something that should have cropped up before now. And Reginald does confirm what I'm telling you. On the Reginald Bro account, the official Reginald Bro said, from my understanding, our LoL GM worked with every player to reverse their wires. Our current players are not affected, not going to jump to conclusions. I think our team's handled the situation well so far, and we'll be open and honest to the community once we have the complete information. So there you go. That was what was occurring there.
It's like, dude, the guy who's literally in charge of your job is asking to borrow you money. There's a bit of a sketchy situation when you feel like saying no to a guy's grandma's cancer surgery who can decide to replace you the next week. That seems pretty sketchy.
Yes, and it's great to see that we're all growing up and we're all learning together, because absolutely what Peter's learned there is that, yes, power dynamics exist and conflicts of interest exist. In that instance that he described, Peter Zhang is serving two masters, himself and the requirement to gather finances, and the organization. He can leverage his position against the player to serve his own master, potentially to the detriment of the org. Now, if only there'd been a situation like this in the not too distant past, where somebody who literally held dominion over someone's job was making decisions that could affect the org. I'm kind of at a loss. I'm kind of at a loss to think of an example. But, listen, we all learn at our own pace, don't we? They do say that.
How did Sword Art fall for it? I have no idea, man. No, it's not that Sword Art fell for it. I don't think Sword Art fell for his scam. He just trusted Peter Zhang to sell his car in the US, which he did. But he just didn't give him the money for it. like Peter Zhang was actually a god. He managed to sell a used Mercedes for 80K. Like, what an absolute legend. Whatever happens after, it doesn't matter. No, bro, it's actually so funny. One of my friends told me he was literally about to send them like several $1,000s. So my friend was in the process of sending Peter Zhang several $1,000s for his grandma's cancer surgery. And as he was about to press send, as he was about to send it, the information for the recipient is like on, right? It shows on like the bank UI, like who's receiving the money. And it was Sword Art's name under the bank account. And
so that, if that detail is accurate, and again, I haven't been able to confirm or corroborate that detail, that suggests that some of the money, a significant portion perhaps, was going to Sword Art directly to essentially buy off his silence. Buy his silence, rather. Now, that deal, that entire deal and the relationship between TSM, the player, the coach, this is now going to be scrutinized even more than it was already scrutinized, because when you have strange financial transactions between a player that already was considered to be overpaid and underwhelming in performance, man, if Riot Games might want to just extricate themselves from the whole situation. Personally, I don't think they should. They might want to extricate themselves from the whole situation, sure, but I wouldn't. I think this whole thing needs to be looked at, and we need to sort of gather what the totality of what was going on was. Because, look, let me tell you all of the problems as I see them. So the first issue you've got, and this is where, listen, I'm an empathetic dude. I know people tell you Richard Lewis is evil incarnate, and he choke slams teenage boys who were just trying to play Dota 2 for the first time at their first ever LAN, and I just walk over and get out of here. This is my game. You fucking herald loader, right? I know they tell you all of this, right? But the reality is, I can empathize with sort of almost all parties in this, which isn't to not universally condemn anything and everything that Peter did, especially abusing a position for potential self-enrichment. But here's the thing. If one guy is sort of given complete authority, no oversight, and is doing about 5 jobs at an organization: scouting, traveling, business negotiation, contract negotiation, translation, literally coaching the team, literally deciding the academy team. That's too much for one dude. That is way too much for one fucking dude. And maybe he's going to go fucking crazy. Now, doesn't justify any of it, but, sounds like he was overworked and there was like a weird bottleneck in TSM operations, right? That's all I'm saying. Next up, obviously, is the academy players. What an honor to play for TSM. Not as much these days. But, what an honor to play for this big fucking organization, right? And the money. And so why would they jeopardize it by speaking out about anyone? Why? They're not going to, right? And also, they're probably super grateful. So you've got that. And then what about the main team? And then what about the deal of the players? And also, how can any of this money be sort of changing hands? And how can you have a coach with yeah, mate, there's just too many layers to this. So Riot are going to have to come in and look at the whole thing. I think the players are probably being a little bit exploited in all of this. And that's obviously unconscionable. Many of them young. I think Yursan's only 17. So, yeah, I mean, I hope Riot could just say this is an internal matter and leave it there. Obviously, as well, if it turns out that there is no sick grandma, well, now then. And obviously, the theft of the money from Sword Art, why are coaches acting as financial conduits for players on your team when they want to buy a car? Who's your player liaison? And, obviously, as well, here's another thing. If it's deemed... and this seems to be a line of investigation based on what my sources told me behind the scene. If it's deemed he acted improperly as sort of a dual coach agent kind of role to those players, well, sure, that's a problem, but TSM own an agency that represent TSM players. So why would we ever allow that in an esports environment? And just to show you what I'm talking about, just in case again you think I'm making this stuff up, I don't make stuff up, despite claims from deeply unstable Reddit moderators. You can just see here, this is TSM Company's talent agency, which is Icon. So the Icon agency reps esports players, including esports players that have represented TSM, and so. That, again, is just textbook conflict of interest. I hope one of the things that at least come out of this is that doesn't happen, right, moving forward. In fact, I hope the Player Association makes an absolute steadfast statement that those types of intermingled businesses, that you just get rid of them. You can't have that. Certainly not in the League of Legends ecosystem, which is ultimately the only dominion they would hold.
He was like, what the fuck? And then he just was like, okay, this is too weird. I'm not. And then it came out that he owed Sword Art a shit ton of money. It's like, dude, if you're gonna do this elaborate loaning scam, how about we start a bank account under your own name? That sounds pretty important.
Thanks, bro.
I don't think TSM did anything wrong here because he was hired a long time ago, and at the time that he was hired, he wasn't doing this yet. This seems like it's an activity that started in the last couple of years. And so he was definitely vetted properly before.
So back, there's there's a straight fire joke and I am not doing it because I am new Richard, but I'm going to keep it in my head, and it was straight fire. I'm going to just quickly visit the timeline where I said it, and everyone types lol and a mega lol. Right, back here. So yeah, look, obviously Lena sort of has an interest in kind of saying, hey, there was nothing, remember me? When I was back there, definitely nothing untoward going on. Now, actually, certainly there is no, I didn't see any, this seems to be from the introduction of Yursan onwards, essentially, is where we start getting into it, and certainly the loans and the financial issues there. That seems to be all relatively new. It seems to have just been something that's cropped up this month. So, she is right in what she's saying, even though she has a vested interest in saying it, that yes, absolutely, he was vetted properly. He wasn't doing anything fucking crazy, so whatever.
And this seems like, he started doing this with the Sword Art roster. So...
Yeah.
So I don't think, you can't blame TSM for this one if one of their employees just decided to, go rogue after being there for multiple years.
Now, pay attention to this, because this, first of all, as I said, I think when Peter left, Lena and Doublelift, I think they did one of their streams. Somebody sent me a clip. It was a while ago, basically sort of saying like, oh, look, another one for TSM. Oh, what a great company, lol. It's always a banger. All the usual fucking memes they go into. But one of the reasons, and one of the things you as a kind of absorber, of news are going to have to be mindful of is that obviously the fact that the roster's been underwhelming, the fact that the roster's had issues, and the fact that Sword Art underperformed, these are criticisms that have been laid on the doorstep of upper tier TSM management. Now, with Peter, realistically, and I'm not saying this is what's happening, but you certainly can see a world where it could be true. They can use him as a very effective scapegoat to say, and maybe fairly, to say, no wonder we had problems in our team. No wonder we were underperforming. Look at all the shit this guy was up to. And in which case, that is a convenience I don't think a big org like TSM will miss. As I've established, they've got somebody who's very PR and press savvy, at the helm of crafting, any narrative they need. And again, it doesn't have to be a crafted narrative. It can just be the straight truth, a convenient truth, let's say. But for me, this certainly, on the surface of it, I would agree. I think it does absolve TSM of some criticism. Now, there's other types of criticism. How a guy, again, can have complete autonomy, authority, and virtually no oversight. Why you don't have an official independent translator. Because you don't know what the fuck that guy's saying to those players or what they're agreeing to. And certainly, if you're not even there in China, if you're not even in the fucking room, how can you lay any claim to it? So there are other problems. It's just not the problems that you thought were the problems in TSM.
No, I'm not affiliated with TSM anymore. I'm just saying it's funny. The situation overall is funny, but you can't blame them for it. It's not a PR statement. I'm just being honest.
That's true. As much as I would love to shit on TSM here, which is one of my all-time favorite pastimes these days, this isn't really TSM's fault. You hired an employee who had a certain set of skills, a lot of connections in the LPL that were very beneficial, and ended up in the last year ending up leveraging that for some really shady, unethical shit. That's not really something you can control. And you're not really going to investigate this guy because he's not really done anything to warrant an investigation, or he's in all honesty, guys, a year ago, everyone had a great relationship with this guy. Everyone thought that he was a hardworking, diligent, maybe he's an idiot with his money, but it's not like he's scamming the company or embezzling any money from the company. I would never imagine a year ago, if you told me about this stuff, I would be like, well, actually, wait. Knowing his personality, I'd be like, oh, that makes sense. But still,
Again, that would have contradicted everything he said prior to this.
Honestly, guys, if you told me that a year ago, I'd be like, oh.
Okay, there's so many weird people in esports, okay? If you had to judge every single person based off of every little weird thing that they've done, there would be no one left in esports.
That's true, guys. Literally every single one of us is on the spectrum, but in some direction.
I don't think that Peter Zhang, at the time that he was hired, had any of these glaring issues.
And we'll leave it there, I think. But there's a couple of other points to this that I just want to get into, because obviously, foolishly, it was me who broke the news, wasn't it? Because why always me, as Mario Balotelli would say. And that came with kind of a bunch of fucking ridiculous reactions, as you'd probably expect. But there were a couple of things I wanted to talk about just before we get into that. So, one aspect of this that makes me wonder about the real veracity, or rather integrity is a better word, I should say, of any potential investigation by Riot is they've been very quick to shut down potential narrative paths before the investigation has taken place. And so there is a new commissioner at the LCS. You can see here. This is Jackie Felling. Jackie Felling is the new commissioner. And in the thread, which is back before I broke my story, she posted, "This is nothing to do with match fixing. This is an internal team matter, not making a statement from Riot at all, but I don't want people to think this had anything remotely to do with match fixing or betting, which it does not." Now, I'm sure my audience can see the fucking problem with such a fucking statement from the LCS commissioner. First of all, you can say you're not making an official statement by Riot. Huge problems there. That's like me putting opinions on my own in my fucking bio and then saying something outrageous. Guess what? Deserto fucking fire me. You just can't get away from that reality. I don't like those rules. I'd like to be able to express opinions without potentially costing me my job every fucking day. But we don't live in that world because of fucking Americans. And, you know, you're an American company, American management, American league, talking about American league issues. These rules definitely apply to you. So you are making a statement on behalf of Riot. You're the commissioner of the NALCS. Furthermore, the fact that this statement doesn't fucking come in any official capacity and it's made as a Reddit comment. Oh, guys, when are we going to fucking just put to bed this idea of any sort of, like, Reddit independence? Reddit is an arm of Riot Games, that subreddit in particular. Now, by the way, just to add to this, because we'll talk about this a little bit to sign off, and then we'll get into the next part of the story, or the next story, rather. I don't even consider this a great evil anymore. You know, people forget that back in the day, when I did my article about the connection between Riot and the League of Legends subreddit moderators, it was against Reddit TOS to enter into a contract with an external entity for anything, for any reason that gave you benefits at all. Now, what people don't realize at the time, the League of Legends subreddit might not have had the most subs. It might have been, you know, you might have had other ones up there, news, politics, cat memes, or whatever. But it was generating the most traffic. So much so that there was a talk back then, whenever I broke those stories, 2013, 2014, I think, that basically Reddit and Riot even had talks about maybe making some sort of avatar, the Snoovatars, you see, that little Reddit dude, and you could have your Snoovatar in the fucking game. You know, it wasn't a fully fleshed out concept back then, the Snoovatars. You get one randomly now when you sign up. I know that I have to sign up with a new account every week, get them burners going. Ooh, he's in the shadows. But, you know, and that was good. That was a business discussion that was going to involve like money and revenue and everything else, right? So, and because they knew it was the main forum, obviously they wanted some sort of control. Now, I hope we can all agree, and I hope we can all look at new developments in law, and certainly Trump, he's going to get a mention in this, because why wouldn't he? It just got ruled, by the way, that an NDA, he had his fucking employees under, his campaign employees, right? Even though they tossed out the allegations that they were making, they had to pay $300,000 to essentially agree that the NDA was unenforceable. NDAs are not good things. I'm sick of Americans telling me this is standard boilerplate language. I don't want a contract over my head that means if you are cunts, I can't call you a cunt. And you have to ask the question, if you need to contractually mandate me to say I can't call you a cunt, or if I do, you can fucking sue me into oblivion for doing so. Why is that? Could it be that you're a cunt? I think so. So using the cunt thesis around NDAs, they're dangerous, they use a lot of overreach, they are designed to intimidate people into silence. That is their single principal use. It's not about, oh, you might leak a secret, because it doesn't stop you doing that. They in no way front load the contract to stop you doing it. What they do is they give you recourse should somebody do it, so they are literally a contract designed for intimidation. Now, at the time on Reddit, it was agreed upon that no moderator for any sub could enter into a contractual agreement. And then I said, oh, look, these Reddit moderators have signed an NDA and sit in a private Skype group, which they say is simply to know when the servers are up or down. But of course, as I would later find out and later expose, other things were discussed in it. A moderator leaked their private chat records. They were wanting to have meetings with Light about how to better, moderate and how to psychologically fuck with the users. And I said, within the context of that and within the context of the NDA, this is explicitly against Reddit's TOS, which it was. And then Reddit went, yeah, well, we're just not going to enforce them here. And in fact, we're going to ban Richard Lewis. Here's some reasons that can't be proven. There's no evidence to substantiate them whatsoever. There never has been. And it was actually some fucked up junkie who's not even at the company anymore that fucking made these allegations about me and has just been allowed to fucking walk away from the company, and no one's ever been held accountable for those lies. And yeah, ultimately, that's why I am banned from Reddit. That is the truth and the reality of the issue. And now I recognize, having signed NDAs, that's fuck all. That's fuck all compared to the shit that goes on Reddit now. Reddit is an AstroTurf shithole. League of Legends was just the first step. That agreement, that NDAs were fine. Go look at the Epic Games subreddit. Go look at any games development subreddit. Bugs and fucking exploits get deleted. You see people who literally work for the company with full moderator status on the subreddits now. You see Epic Games deleting stuff about the malware and the Chinese spyware on the fucking client. People were taking money, people were taking bribes to promote certain things over other things. This is all public knowledge. You can't trust a singular thing you see on Reddit. And so obviously, was this a big deal at the time? Probably. Is it a big deal by today's standards? Absolutely not. But Reddit does remain the primary hub and the primary interest of people who run League of Legends esports. They pay people to read the subreddits, to react to the subreddits, to give quick messages to the subreddits. They are glued to it. They are glued to it more than any other fucking medium because they can exercise this influence and control over the medium. Not even a big deal that they can. Something everyone does now. So just to sort of bring you all up to date. But I think it's grotesquely unprofessional that an LCS commissioner is coming into a Reddit thread to tell you, before the investigation has been concluded, perhaps even started, that it's definitely not to do with these things. Who knows what road you can go down? Put it this way. Imagine a hypothetical. I know people struggle with hypotheticals, but let's imagine a hypothetical where it turns out there is no grandmother, and actually it's gambling debts. Well, she's now said it's not about match fixing or betting. Well, it would be about betting in that instance, then, wouldn't it? So I'm not saying that's accurate. I'm not saying that is a possibility, but I am saying it's a possibility. I'm saying it's a possibility that could be turned up in an investigation. And the wording of it, I don't want people to think this had anything remotely to do with match. She completely ruled it out before the investigations even took place, before the players' investigations even took place, before TSM's own internal investigation has even been finalized. That's just outrageous. That's out of pocket like fuck. So there was that. And then just to end on a little bit of laughter, obviously it couldn't be posted to the subreddit because, why would it be? It's a big story. People want to be informed. League of Legends mods still won't let my news be posted to the subreddit. By the way, their reason for it, no matter what they say, no matter how many lies they tell, I have the head moderator of the subreddit that made that decision saying we are doing it to financially penalize Richard Lewis. And the reason for that is because they're morons who think I get paid by the click. Now, there was a time period where being banned from the League of Legends subreddit, did have a slight impact on my career. My YouTube didn't blow up at a time when it could have done as a result of that. Now I'm beholden to different algorithms that keep you back. The type of story I get didn't get enough eyeballs on me. There were some issues about me potentially moving to different publications who didn't want the baggage. But now Reddit doesn't even generate a significant amount of traffic. It's it's a tenth of what it used to be. Maybe even worse. There's more different types of social media. People are smarter with SEO optimization than they were back in the day. So it just doesn't impact on me at all. It's just a funny little thing. I take great pleasure, and you can clip this, you sick fucks, because you will be watching it. I know you. I know you. I know you're here. I take great pleasure in knowing that when I break big news in League of Legends, they've got to spend a whole day scrambling, suppressing the message, banning anyone who says my name, right? Like getting abusive DMs. I think, fuck you. If you want to make, you make that bed, you can lie in it. No one ever spared a thought for me or all the abuse I got from your lies. So the truth, hurting your feelings, absolutely perfect. But anyway, check this out. The worst moderator is a guy called Kahootie. He's like out of his fucking mind obsessed with this. This is how they justify why you can't post my article or anything about my article until a third party has verified the contents of my article, right? Or I go to them and leak my sources, which they used to ask me to do all the time because they're mentally ill. But this guy's the worst. So they were removing the official statement I showed you earlier from the Player Association, and he says Richard Lewis content is banned. That's Kahootie, right? He's really ill, by the way. The one you keep removing is literally 2 tweets from the Player Association. Maybe you should read the posts. And then it said that post made unsourced claims. And see, what they do is you can't use Richard Lewis as a source. He's persona non grata on this one subreddit, not in the world of esports, not anywhere else, just on this one subreddit that this lunatic controls with another lunatic. I think all the rest of them are just bored of it after 8 years, but whatever, we can keep it going. It's kind of funny. But then if you say, okay, Richard Lewis said this, and you post a separate thing, they go, that's unsourced because it's Richard Lewis. So you can't post the content to source the claim, and then you can't make the claims in the content because they're unsourced. Genius, right? So these guys are just out of their fucking mind with this stuff. And obviously it didn't blow up as much as it did. By the way, just to qualify why I think this guy's out of his mind, loads of red flags on social media. I think if you reply to the president at any point, it's not the president, it's a Twitter account. If you on Twitter ever reply to the president, I think you're deranged. I think you're out of your mind. So just putting that out there. If you ever, you can quote tweet and go, look what this guy's saying, that's fine. Directly replying to them as if you are talking to them, you may as well be talking to your fucking imaginary friend at that fucking point, right? And then, obviously, I just wanted to roll it back, right? Because I'd been getting a lot of negative attention for Riot. This was, they sent, back in the day, people forget this, and it's just nice to have it on a video, so it's all fresh in everyone's memory. The League of Legends subreddit was so deranged in terms of the people who were part of it, and the control that they thought they had, and they were all being supported by Riot. They literally wrote a ransom note to my editor, my boss at the time, and basically said, we will unban his content if you agree to the following conditions. And here are the following conditions. We will not reconsider our ban on Richard Lewis content if, 1, he threatens us with legal action. By the way, why? To try and intimidate or blackmail someone into refusing their right to litigation, that's a bit dodgy, isn't it? But anyway, okay. Doxing, again, I don't know why they keep bringing this up. It's also a very woolly concept, if your username links to your Facebook, what do you want me to do? That's not my bad. Can't mention the existence of the subreddit or any other harm. 2, if Richard continues to link comments directly to his Twitter from the subreddit. By the way, I'll post whatever the fuck I want on Twitter. You are a subreddit, you are a Reddit volunteer. They wanted, and this was the big stumbling block, they wanted editorial input, they wanted influence, they wanted me to change the headlines of articles to what they thought was good, they wanted me to, but it's Reddit TOS and Twitter TOS don't even align. By the way, Reddit now just let you link to shit because their website's fucking dying and they can't monetize it. 3, if Richard Lewis explicitly mentions any Redditor on his Twitter in a context unrelated to his published articles. Or 4, if Richard Lewis continues to create false or misleading content about the subreddit or team in what seems to be an attempt to keep the story of his ban and content ban alive. How dare I do any of these things? So imagine... and if he manages all of these things, we'll consider his content ban in 3 months. You can see this was in 2016. This is just before I went to work for Turner, which, oh, that was delicious. Because here they are, trying to hold me and my job to ransom, and then I'm just working on American network TV while these fucking absolute tragic cunts are doing things like this. While we're not going to require anyone to correct the record for the demonstrably false things, never was any demonstrably false things. The only claim they ever made about it being false was predicated on the fact they can't read English, because for a lot of them it was a second language. It was like some sentence wording that they didn't understand. Like that thing when Americans go, I won't use they pronouns because they is only plural. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Stop butchering my language. Right? Anyway, any good faith effort on Richard's part to correct the record will weigh heavily when we are reconsidering the content ban. And so, you know, you're dealing with just lunatics. You're just dealing with like you know, so it's fine. Like so basically in the space of 24 hours, you know, I think I had like, you know, 3 sort of major stories percolating away in 3 different esports, because that's who I am. So, you know, if it doesn't go on League, no skin off my nose, but just know those are the people you are dealing with. And also, if you go and look at the deleted comments in those threads, it's hilarious. Anyone saying my name, deleted. This guy who did the tweet, this guy Luke, he got banned for tweeting about it. You know, they are really, really sad human beings. And it's like I say it all the time. There was a time I was angry about it. Now the only sentiment is pity. It's pity. This is the peak of their lives, running this subreddit that's going to dwindle and influence. And obviously in the future, League of Legends isn't even going to be a thing. They're doing this with the best years of their life. Many of them still very young, not even in their 20s. And it's like, you know, and mind you, some are in their fucking 40s. You know, it's just like, guys, like, you know, listen, you had a good shot. You came at the king. You missed. Now you're not even an annoyance. I just enjoy stoking this because I know how much it annoys you. Who wins? It's me again, isn't it?